The system is constantly being activated, but with no expenditure of the...
Wow.
Yeah, so it's and then therefore for the family member, again, the limbic system is not the thinking part of the brain. That's the cerebral cortex. So the addict alcoholic, a lot of theirs is in the limbic system, and the family members, a lot of theirs is in the limbic system.
Yeah.
So they take emotion as fact. So when they go, oh, what if he comes home drunk, or what if he gets the car, what if he picks up the kids, or what if she, and what if he doesn't stop like he said he was going to, and then am I going to have to say or do what I've said I was going to do, and you go that, and so they stay in this heightened sense and reacting to all these feelings as if they're facts, instead of going, whoa, wait a minute, is this, and Dr. Ratty has this wonderful expression, is it a stick or is it a snake? So stop yourself for a minute, get yourself into the cerebral cortex where you can think it through and say, is it a stick or is it a snake? And if it's a snake, run. If it's a stick, you have some options here.
Yes, relax. So what suggestions do you have for people, family members or best friends, or, you know, a group of friends who have someone in treatment? What's your suggestion people do to take care of themselves?
Well, that was the whole purpose of this book, was to give you a roadmap of people, of what to do next. So the first part is to understand what addiction is, so that they can start to let go of some of the anger or the guilt, and for the family member, the addict alcoholic, to read it and understand that too. Then to understand what's happened in their brains, and then to understand that all of this for everybody is about rewiring the brain. And some of the basic things you can do, whether you get further down the road, such as maybe going to Al-Anon or maybe going to therapy with an addiction specialist. Al-Anon is a 12-step program for family members, and there's Nar-Anon if drugs is the particular
so
addiction.
Al-Anon is for people who end up, more likely about alcohol. So that's like the...
Yeah, that's like a 12-step program for alcoholics.
So Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. Then there's Narcotics Anonymous and Nar-Anon.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And so
Gamblers
that's
Anonymous and
Gamblon.
Gamblon.
Right.
And,
and so that's one of the ways. But then it's also, it could be therapy. It could be, well, for the first 4 things that we all can do till we even get further is understand nutrition, exercise, sleep. Now they have, again, this new brain research, and again, this research is just in the last 10, 15 years with the change in imaging technologies that allow them to study the live brain. But they now understand it actually does stuff in the brain. We always knew it was good for the body, but this actually helps with neurotransmitters. It helps with the infrastructure in the brain. So understand, so those 3 things, and then another one is just mindfulness, to actually try to do something for 5 minutes and only think of that something. Like if you do go on a walk, instead of being on the cell phone walking your dog and trying to drink coffee, if you just tried to go on the walk and focus on all the colors of green, for example, you start to help your rewire new neural networks that aren't always based on this, what if I got to do, and so they call that mindfulness.
That's interesting. So that's like turning your thinking around as well. You know, I was thinking today, I've been going through a difficult time, so I've been analyzing the difficulties when really I've decided I want to analyze all the possibilities. You know, the
it's like going right instead of left.
Of joy, the possibilities of support, the possibilities of, you know, good things.
Right. It's just changing how we think, because that changes the neural network.
And it changes your life.
Right.
Wow. So, are you a family member of addicted people? So what things have helped you to sort of get out of that thinking that you've described?
Well, I did therapy with a trained professional who understood addiction, and I think that's really critical, because I'd been involved, it's been a number of years, and so it kind of builds on itself. So there are sometimes underlying issues you need to try to come to terms with, so therapy worked well with that. I also went to Al-Anon. I also did exercise, hikes, swimming, trying to do things that are just fun and not always directed at an outcome.
Right.
So
You mean have a life?
Have a life, yeah. And life doesn't have to be complicated or some big accomplishment.
Yeah.
In fact, I now have a saying that says, don't just do something, sit there, because I used to always just do something in order to make the feeling go away.
Right.
And so it's learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings and really kind of wrestle through, is it a stick or is it a snake? And,
Right.
and recognize, have the feeling, but you don't necessarily have to act on it.
I just had a thought too. Do you think when you're obsessed about the addicted person that in itself can become an addiction? You know, and it's abstaining from concentrating on them could also create withdrawals.
Absolutely, because you're right. While you're in it, you're trying to control how much and if and make it all change. So a lot of times, if you don't get help yourself, the poor addict alcoholic comes back home and now you're focused on their recovery the same way you were focused on trying to make them stop. So it's, did you go to a meeting? I thought you were going to go to a meeting. You said you were going to go to a meeting and you didn't go to, and you get the. And so it's this like, whoa. So and the other part I think is so important is to understand it takes time, because these are embedded neural networks and you have to change how you think so that you can create new neural networks or repair the ones that have been damaged. Yeah.
That's interesting that there's so much concentration on the malleability of the brain that if you've gone down that negative road, you can actually go in a different direction.
Exactly.
I mean, that is hope.
Yeah.
And Charlie Rose has been doing a whole series on the brain.
Oh, those are excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can actually get the transcripts on off his website, which is really great. And he's had the best of the best on his show.
In fact, I just watched one the other night, and they're amazing. Really. It's so exciting, because to me, it gives all of us wonderful opportunities to live our lives, whether the addict alcoholic stops or whether you stay together or you don't, or if it's, the person gets help.
And you know what's really amazing to me is that meditation and prayer is now under the scrutiny of science, because it's showing changes in the brain.
Yeah, right.
So millions of years of prayer and meditation now is, mainstream.
Isn't that something?
So isn't that amazing? You know, the other people that I was thinking of, Stephanie Brown, who runs the Addiction Institute, has done a lot of studies. If anyone's interested in looking at what happens to the entire family when one or two of the adults do get into recovery, and the impact that has.
That's where I got my therapy, was through the Addictions Institute.
And yes, there's plenty of references in this book, and also Claudia Black, who identified that everybody reacts differently to the addicted person and sort of finds a role for themselves,
Yes.
And that's always good to identify and how you're going to get out of that. And then John Bradshaw, who looked at how the family unit tries to stay balanced. So if one person leaves or does things differently, then there's a reshuffling.
Right.
And that can sometimes not be a healthy reshuffling.
Right.
And so what you're talking about is, let's reshuffle in a healthy way so that everyone can come out and feel like they've recovered from the addiction that's not just the addicted person, but in all of us. And
the other really important part of doing that is that the key risk factors, and addiction is caused by a combination of risk factors, biological, environmental, and emotional. And so the key ones are social environment. So if you live in a family where drinking is just seen as something that always happens in all activities, or college, you're in that amongst other kids, or if you're in a school where it's common, or mental illness, what that causes is its own chemical and structural changes in the brain. So that's another reason. So if you have anxiety or depression, which can often happen to children in families with undiagnosed or untreated addiction. And then you have early use, because the brain, they now understand, is not developed by 12. It takes till about 25, and there's some critical developmental processes going on, which makes early use makes you far more susceptible to addiction.
4 times more.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then another one is childhood trauma, which can be growing up, because as the brain is wiring from infancy on, it's reacting, especially in those first several years when it's all in response to sound, sight, touch, and smell, to the world around. It's not reading it, it's not looking it up on the internet. The brain, you know, you're developing how you cope and see the world. So those are some of the key risk factors. And so growing up in a family with undiagnosed or undiscussed addiction or untreated sets up these risk factors for children when the last thing in the world we would ever want. So we need to talk about the secondhand impacts and how that's setting up the risk factors so that we can finally break the cycle.
Yeah, and it seems that also people who work in the field have realized that there needs to be treatment programs, and then there needs to be ongoing recovery support, not just for the addicted person but the family. But there's also the other aspect of looking at risk factors and organizing prevention programs so that those risk factors are reduced.
Right.
You know, reducing the access, reducing the normalcy of drinking. And understanding how advertising affects people. And so that's exciting how the field of addiction has, you know, grown so much over the years.
And to appreciate the role of mental illness, because a lot of times people with mental illness, young people, will substance in order to make themselves feel better, and that starts to set up a cycle for them.
And substance use also can create mental...
Well, not so much create, but it can certainly exacerbate.
Yeah, but it actually has created. Some of the research has shown that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it goes around and around in a cycle. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We could talk forever about this. We've been listening to Lisa Frederiksen, whose latest book is Loved One in Treatment, Now What? And you've been viewing Perspectives on Healthy Living, which is hosted by Voices United in collaboration with the Pathway Society. I'm Gabrielle Antolovich, your host, and there is always more information to be had. Thank you.
Thank you so much.